guys, Moses Bygate-Smith here with Power and Prowess, and today we're bringing you guys a video on mostly dunk training, but this can be for anyone from basketball players to people who are trying to learn their dunks for the first time, even for people who are currently dunkers and just wanting to build their skill set up or their ability up a little more. So obviously with the global pandemic we're facing at the moment, it can be hard to train, especially with lack of access to the likes of equipment and just basic gym facilities. Even basketball hoops as well. Not everyone's got that available at their own homes. So that's the reason why I'm making this video today, because you still can train towards those endeavors, and I'm going to show you how. Now, a lot of these drills are based off of a few things. One being motor patterning, and another one just being more so around biomechanical concepts. So motor patterning, simplified, is essentially just skill acquisition or learning a movement or a technique. So there are lots and lots of different ways to move, but based off of biomechanical principles, which we'll get into soon, there are optimal ways of moving. In this case, generating as much torque as possible. Now, torque is the unit used for rotational momentum or rotational power or force. So essentially what we're looking at in a jumping approach is the torque that we generate from the hips in particular. We generate torque from the ankle and the knee as well, but we're going to be mostly talking about the hips for the sake of the drills that I've implemented in this video. Another one as well is in the shoulder in particular, but we'll be focusing more on velocity in that case. So one thing that I want to just go through, guys, is a lot of people get caught up in the training, specifically in the weight room for dunking. Now, that's not at all wrong. I do agree that there are some prerequisite abilities of your maximal strength, your rate of force development, your flexibility, stuff of that nature. But all in all, dunking is actually a skill, okay? Yes, you're utilizing specific energy systems such as the phosphagen system, and you are having to apply certain amounts of force to get up, depending on how heavy you are, what your limb lengths are like. But it is a skill at the end of the day. And this is something that I wish I had learnt in my earlier years, because after devoting years and years of trying to get a heavier back squat or trying to get a higher box squat, at the end of the day, it comes down to your ability to dunk. And dunking is very technical, which we'll get into. Now, the first drill that we're going to go over is particularly one that can be manipulated depending on what your technique is like, but it's just a basic two-step approach. So what the two-step approach looks like is however you plant. For me, I'm a left-right plant sequencer, so that means that my penultimate step is my left foot and my block foot is my right foot. So the way that this works is what I'll do is I'll set up on my right foot with my left behind, and then as I move my mass to the front of my body, I am going to push my right leg behind me so that I essentially get into a near split. Now what this is training here is the penultimate step. Relating back to the biomechanical concepts that we've touched on, we want to pretty much create as much torque as possible through the hip. So what we're going to do there is maximize the radius or the rotational distance that we can apply that force. So in this case, it's the hip. If I'm in a split, I am in a much lower position, and from there what it means is that I can actually swing that leg across a longer radius or a further distance. So the more distance I have, the more time I have to apply force. So this is actually going to translate to jumping higher ultimately as well. You may have a stall back in your original jumping technique, but for the sake of optimizing your jumping performance and your dunking performance to the best of your ability, you should take a step back, ingrain the proper motor patterns, and long term, you're going to be a lot better off. So going back to the drill itself, you're back on your right leg, and then as you swing your left leg forward, you're going to step, and then that right leg is going to go from being behind you to swinging across and blocking in front. So this is going to translate the horizontal momentum or the horizontal acceleration that you've built up, and it's going to transfer it a little more vertically. So it's not going to be all vertical, but it's going to share it, it's going to distribute it. So you're going to be flying in a diagonal trajectory pathway. Now, For me, my particular weakness is that right foot before the penultimate. And by weakness, I mean I am not maximizing the displacement I have between my left foot and my right foot. So what I'm focusing on in particular is really pushing that right leg behind me. This, as I've said, is going to maximize the amount of torque I can generate from the hip, and the rest will follow. Now, the rest of the drills include hand speed drills, and the other obvious one is low rim dunking. Now, with the hand speed drill, I really like this because it's a very important factor, particularly for making the more complex dunks, such as the between the leg dunks, the behind the back dunks, and the windmill dunks. We're going to be talking about the velocity of which we can achieve our swing, okay? So, for a lot of pro dunkers, they have long arms, so a lot of their struggles is actually hand speed. So what happens is, although they have longer arms, they may be able to produce more torque or rotational forces, but it also means that they're slower, regardless of the amount of force that they can produce. So, what I like to do in particular is just do a arm speed specific drill, and that can be mimicking whatever dunk that you're trying to do. So you can do a between the leg, you can do a windmill, you can do a behind the back, whatever you're trying to mimic. And here, for me, I have long arms, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly bend that arm, and eventually when I can produce more speed, I'm going to straighten that arm out and really swing around, okay? So, we're really trying to make sure that we cover as much distance in as little time as possible, all right? Velocity, as you guys I'm sure will know if you're familiar with biomechanical concepts, it's distance divided by time, okay? So, we want to make sure that time is nice and short, all right? Now, as we move into the third drill, the obvious one, low rim dunking. Now, some of you might have different opinions on this, but this is, in my opinion, the most optimal way to transfer the abilities that you have obtained from the previous two drills, and it's actually a better potentiator into the high rim dunking. So it makes sense to be able to dunk on a low rim before you can on a high, right? You're not going to high jump 1.80 m before you can high jump 1.60 m, all right? It's about progression. So here, you can still have maximal intent. That's where this comes in, okay? Although the rim is low, you are practicing the correct motor patterns at a set intent. Now, you may have to scale back the intent or the intensity depending on how poorly you recruit the motor patterns. So quite often when we rush through things, we forget about the correct techniques and the correct patterns. So find the most effective intensity of which you can produce the motor pattern or reproduce the motor pattern and go with that. Intensity should still be high though. From here, the obvious one is you can go onto the higher rims, and then that's where the application occurs. So those were just a couple of drills. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Obvious ones, leave a thumbs up. Comment if you guys want any specific content covered over this isolation period and beyond. Make sure to subscribe as well, and definitely turn that notification bell on. We'll be bringing out a lot more videos and content very soon. And go and follow Power and Prowess on Instagram. Cheers, guys.